All right. Not that I will trust Brendan, but All right, good afternoon, and apologies for all these scheduling issues the last 2 days, but the President's Security Council wants to brief at noon. The President's Security Council briefs at noon. Today, as you know, is World AIDS Day, and we will be joined shortly by our guest, Naiman Varugisi, the Director ad interim of the UN AIDS Office here in New York. He will brief you virtually on the latest World AIDS Day report entitled Prevailing Against Pandemics by Putting People at the Center. And a reminder that tomorrow at 8:45, the Secretary General will be speaking at Columbia University's World Leaders Forum on the state of our planet. He will stress that we are at a crucial point in time in which we need to make peace with nature to avert the worst impacts of climate change. He will also talk about how the pandemic provides us with an opportunity to rethink human activities and transform our economies. The Secretary General will also call on all countries, businesses, and financial institutions to adopt plans for transitioning to net zero emissions by 2050. His speech will be followed by a virtual Q&A session with Columbia University students, and you'll be able to watch it live on webtv.un.org. In a few minutes at 1:30, the Secretary General will speak via pre-recorded video message at the launch event for his report on Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration. He says the report describes how the Global Compact is taking root in promising ways and reflects growing global understanding of the great benefits of human mobility. But he says that if poorly managed, migration can also generate huge challenges, from tragic loss of life to rights abuses to social tensions. The pandemic has also heightened those challenges and has had negative effects on more than 2.7 million people, migrants, particularly women and girls. That will be available to you. Update on Ethiopia, where we are obviously continuing our call on all parties to the conflict in Tigray to allow unconditional, free, and safe humanitarian access to the region. Nearly 1 month since the start of the conflict, the humanitarian situation continues to deteriorate. Our humanitarian colleagues on the ground have reported that there is a critical shortage of emergency supplies to respond to increasing needs. The conflict in Tigray is taking place in a context where more than 800,000 people were already in urgent need of assistance and protection. This includes nearly 96,000 Eritrean refugees who were in Ethiopia and mostly in Tigray, and nearly 600,000 people relying on food aid to survive. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that aid workers in Tigray need immediate access to food, water, and medical supplies, as well as fuel to run water pumps and other activities. From our side, we have pre-deployed personnel to key locations in Afar and Amhara region to support a possible assessment and response missions in Tigray while negotiations on access continue. And for its part, the UN Refugee Agency also appealed to Ethiopia's federal government for urgent access to Eritrean refugees in Tigray. They say that concerns are growing by the hour, noting that camps will now have run out of food, which makes hunger and malnutrition a real danger. The agency also says that Ethiopian refugees continue to arrive in the hundreds to Sudan, where nearly 46,000 people having arrived since the start of November. Over the weekend, UNHCR launched a response plan to deal with the growing number of refugees in eastern Sudan, which the plan brings together 30 humanitarian partners working together with the government to provide shelter, food, water, and other supplies at the cost of $147 million to meet needs up to 100,000 refugees for the next 6 months. And as you saw, we confirmed last night something you had all been asking me about, which is that the Secretary General has spoken by telephone with President-elect Joe Biden to extend his personal congratulations to the President-elect. Mr. Guterres underscored the essential role played by the enduring close cooperation between the United States and the United Nations, and he looks forward to working with President-elect and his team to to build on our partnership to address the many urgent issues facing the world today, including the pandemic, climate change, upholding peace and security, promoting human rights, and addressing humanitarian needs, to mention just a few. And earlier today, the Secretary General spoke at today's session to commemorate the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. He said he had a deep sense of worry about the grim realities in the occupied Palestinian territory and the diminishing prospects of resolving the conflict. Meanwhile, he warned the pandemic has worsened the already dire humanitarian and socioeconomic situation. The Secretary General said he hopes that recent developments will encourage Palestinians and Israeli leaders to re-engage in a meaningful negotiation with support of the international community towards a two-state solution that will create opportunities for regional cooperation. Only a two-state solution that realizes the legitimate national aspirations of Palestinians and Israelis can lead to sustainable peace, he added. He also mentioned and called on member states to provide the necessary resources to UNRWA to continue delivering its vital services to millions of Palestine refugees. Yesterday afternoon, the SG spoke at the virtual summit of heads of state of the Central American Integration System, otherwise known as SICA. He offered his support and condolences for the loss of life following the two hurricanes that hit the area, reflecting on the vulnerability of the region to climate change. And he also said it is more urgent now than ever to strengthen multilateralism, cooperation, to ensure that the economic recovery from the pandemic prioritizes inclusion and that no one is left behind. Earlier today, our colleagues at the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs presented the 2021 Global Humanitarian Overview. Next year, we, along with our partners, are aiming to mobilize $35 billion to help 160 million in the most vulnerable people in 56 countries. Obviously, the shock of the pandemic has increased the number of people in need, and that number has risen by 40% compared to last year, and this is a record number. Addressing the launch by pre-recorded message, the Secretary General said the humanitarian system again proved its worth in 2020, but that the crisis is far from over. He emphasized that humanitarian aid budgets face dire shortfalls as the impact of the global pandemic continues to worsen. Also speaking at the event was Mark Lowcock, the UN's humanitarian chief, who said that a clear choice confronts us. We can let 2021 be the year of the grand reversal, unraveling 40 years of progress, he added, or we can work together to make sure we find a way out of this pandemic. Speaking of pandemic, quick update from Brazil, where our resident coordinator, Niki Fabianic, who leads the team there, this month, the joint SDG Fund for Brazil launched a campaign targeting candidates who ran for mayor's offices in over 5,500 municipalities. The runoff in several cities took place this past Sunday. The goal was to engage local leaders to invest early childhood development as a means to recover better from COVID-19 and achieve the SDGs. The campaign targeted 11,000 candidates from key cities, with 5 agencies working on the ground. The UN team is also boosting its telemedicine or online consultation with doctors in the northern region of the country. The focus is on women's health, prenatal care during the pandemic, with UNFPA in the lead. And in the Amazon region, the International Organization for Migration continues its mobile health units targeting indigenous peoples and also migrants coming from Venezuela, with almost 150 medical visits this week alone. And just want to flag that UNICEF put out a report along with the International Telecommunications Union that shows that 2/3 of the world's school-age children do not have internet connection in their home. This represents 1.3 billion children aged 3 to 17. UNICEF points out that 250 million students worldwide are still impacted by COVID school closures, forcing hundreds of millions to rely on virtual learning. Those with no internet access, education can be out of reach. That report is online. And lastly, want to just announce that our colleague François Batalingia of Rwanda is taking up his post as resident coordinator for the Comoros today. His appointment follows the confirmation by the host government. As you know, resident coordinators lead UN teams as they support countries' response to recover better from the pandemic and achieve the SDGs while making the most of the UN assets at the country, regional, and global levels. We remain at full gender parity and north-south balance among all our resident coordinators, covering 162 countries and territories. Mr. Bays.
To begin with, just a follow-up on Ethiopia. You said you had pre-deployed personnel that you wanted to get in and negotiations on access continue. I'm assuming that's the federal government that is not currently letting them in.
Tell me, the negotiations are going on with the federal government.
Yeah, so just tell us what's at stake here, why you need those people in.
Well, what's at stake is the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, what we have are an already dire humanitarian situation before the fighting started. We have, as we said, 96,000 Eritrean refugees. We've had now for weeks low access on fuel, on food. We have no visibility on the actual humanitarian situation in that area. So it is critical that the assessment missions go in as quickly as possible. And as I said, the discussions with the government are ongoing, I would say, in a positive way.
On Iran. First, Iranian MPs seem to be preparing a new bill which would restrict the inspections by the IAEA and force the Iranians to increase their enrichment level to 20%. Is there any reaction from the UN?
Well, we're obviously watching those discussions. Nothing has been, as far as I know, nothing has been voted on and gone through. But we've always called on Iran to abide by its commitments to the IAEA and JCPOA, and that position is unchanged.
And a separate story in Iran concerning the scientist, Iranian-Swedish scientist Ahmed Reza Jali. There are reports from human rights groups that a judge has now said he should be taken from prison for execution. What's the UN's view?
I have not seen those reports. It is clear that our stand against capital punishment is unequivocal. But I will look into these very concerning reports. Madame Lederer.
Thank you, Steph. A question on Libya and a special envoy. We heard from the South African ambassador a little while ago that he expects an announcement soon. Any idea of how soon this week?
My definition of soon is very vague. Yes, Alan.
Stéphane, I have a follow-up on Libya.
Let's not say that the Secretary General and his team have not been working very hard on trying to close that process, which is not fully in our hands. Yes, Alan.
Follow-up on the appointment of Mr. Mladenov. As far as I remember, the ESG sent a letter to the Security Council last week, and the Security Council was supposed to send back the response to that. And as far as I know, Russia wants the replacement, the successor of Mr. Mladenov to be appointed simultaneously. So can you name any, can you say where do we stand on that? And can you name any names of the successors of Mr. Mladenov on the Middle East peace process? Thank you.
No. No on everything you've said, basically, because I don't want to... listen, Alan, as you know, this is a process that's been complicated. There are a lot of moving parts. The Secretary General is just one of those parts. He, more than anyone else, but though I don't doubt everyone else's sincerity, would like to see the slot filled in Libya. while again, it bears saying that Stephanie Williams, I think, has done a great job and shown a lot of progress. But as always, it's best to have a person permanently in place as opposed to someone with acting in their title. It's been as tortuous a process as I've seen in a long time. Carla. And then we'll go to the screen.
I don't know whether you've covered this or not, but a letter was sent by the Secretary General of Polisario to the Secretary General Guterres regarding a meeting that was supposed to be held between both Secretaries General and making reference to an attack by Morocco on the eve of that meeting, which they say was intended to torpedo the meeting. So was, in fact, a meeting held, and if so, what did the Secretary General have to say about it?
Let me look into that letter, and then I will answer you.
It was November 13th.
Okay, thank you. Abdelhamid.
Thank you. First, I think there is 11 children in Yemen has been killed in the last 3 days. Are you aware of this report?
Sorry, your connection is very bad, Abdelhamid. I'm having trouble hearing you.
Can I repeat myself? Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. UNICEF said that 11 children had been killed in Yemen in the last 3 days. Are you aware of this report, and do you have anything to say about it?
No, I haven't seen that particular release from UNICEF, but I have no doubt if they've put it out, I have no doubt of the veracity of it, and it's yet another reminder of why we need a political and a nationwide ceasefire there as quickly as possible.
My second question, Stéphane. Recently, I asked you about a possible visit by U.S. Secretary of State Pompeo to a settlement. In fact, he visited the settlement of Ashdod near Ramallah, and it was like a statement by the U.S. recognizing settlement as part of Israel. And I expected also a comment because you said we can't comment on a visit that didn't happen, but the visit did happen. Do you have anything to say about it?
Our comment is just to reiterate our position again. That on the illegality of settlements in the occupied Palestinian territory. That's you can do the analysis and the compare and contrast. This is our position. Okay, Toby.
Hi, thanks very much, Stéphane. Did the Secretary General put out a formal statement on the killing of the Iranian scientist? If so, I missed it, and I'm sorry about that. And just as a corollary to that question, is there a general comment about the killing and the assassination of civilians that seem to be politically or militarily motivated? Does the UN have a formal position on this?
Our answer to both of your questions is that we stand against assassinations and extrajudicial killings, and that I think given the volatility that already exists in the region, the Secretary General is calling for restraint from all parties. Stefano. Vacara.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you, Stéphane. 3 months ago today, 18 fishermen were captured in international water by the Libyan militia of General Haftar. My question is, did the Italian government ever ask directly the Secretary General to mediate or help in resolve the situation?
Look,
and what the Secretary General thinks about it?
I don't know if there was a direct request from the Italian government. What I can tell you is that the mission on the ground is seized of the matter and is trying to do its best to work for a positive outcome for those fishermen who are in detention. Okay.
So you don't know if the Italian government asked directly?
I don't know off the top of my head if there was a direct request, but what I can tell you is that we are working. We are working on it. Though I have no doubt anyway, I'll find out, but I can tell you that we are working on it. Okay, I don't see any more. James, and then we'll go to our guest.
I've got a couple more questions, if I
course.
can. One is another question on timing in Libya, not to do with the Special Envoy or Mr. Mladenov's appointment, but you'll remember that the Secretary-General's report on Libya was delayed, quite a rare thing that those reports are delayed because of the Tunis agreements that were made. Do you have a new date for that?
It's a good
because he has to come up with the monitoring, one assumes, with his recommendation for the monitoring. So it'd be useful for us to be given that date.
Yeah, I will find out.
Okay. And then the last two questions are on Uganda. The election candidate, Bobby Wine, was electioneering and then travelling in his car and ended up being surrounded by police who then fired shots into the car, hit several members of his entourage. I'm not sure of their injuries or their status. Do you have a comment on this taking place with someone who is one of the most prominent candidates in the election against President Museveni?
It's a very worrying development, clearly. I think we have called and we will continue to call on the security forces in Uganda to respect human rights, to show and respect the rule of law. I think it is very important that there be a positive climate for these elections to go ahead, and all political leaders and actors should commit to peaceful conduct and refrain from any incitement to violence or any violence themselves.
And just to add to that, a television crew from the CBC of Canada were expelled from Uganda there to cover the situation ahead of the election.
I don't have the details on that, and I will look, but it's clear that we've always stood for the right of journalists to do their job in every corner of the world free of any harassment.